enlightenment itself is kind of a state of consciousness, but it's internal. The mistake that people make is they externalize it, they literalize it, they concretize it, and they go, oh, enlightenment is a thing, right? It's an object, and it's a state, and in that state, I now have superhuman powers, right? So either you're a scientist and you admit that you don't, B, you're crazy, which is, there's lots of insane people who think they can do all kinds of amazing things, or you're just lying. But it's only one of those three. Okay, and in all the traveling that I've done in the world, and all the masters I've met, and all the things I've done, I've never seen anything extraordinary, to be perfectly honest. Now, I've been, offered drugs to see extraordinary things, but I don't need to do that. I've seen, I know people have like tried sleep deprivation, and they do all the time. I mean, this is standard part of ritual to see extraordinary things. But that has nothing to do with the spirituality. That has to do with the limitations of your brain. So if I keep you up for 48 hours, you will see shit. Okay? This is not a mystical, magical thing. This is like I'm on the freeway, and I'm sleep deprived. You start to see things. This is just what it is. The distinction is for me, I've been able to remain a scientist on my path. Scientist first. So, and I'm an observer, and I just pay attention, and I go, oh, okay, well, I believe I'm having an experience right now. But let me check it. Let me verify. Because to just have an experience in my own head and confuse that as three-dimensional reality, well, people do that all the time. But that's not what I'm interested in doing. Okay, to be honest. I mean, it's like, yeah, I feel good in my own head, but dude, I don't need a whole fucking spiritual path for that. All I need to do to feel good in my own head is close my eyes, or not even close my eyes, take a deep breath. Well, guess what? Now I'm an enlightened master. Yeah. But that's all in my head. Right. Once I realize that, I'm free of needing to follow all of the paths. I can manage my own enlightenment, my own awakeness, my own spirituality in my head, which is where it's happening for everybody. Right. If I hug you, you will have a release of chemicals in your brain, and they'll feel good. Yeah. Well, I'm happy. Good. Like, that's beautiful. Yay. But so what? Right. Like why? I don't need to turn it into a cult. Right. Just give somebody a hug. Hold them for more than 45 seconds, and all the benefits will naturally happen, and we don't need to start a religion or a cult over that. Yeah. So, long-winded answer, I think, enlightenment is just, it's a hierarchical structure. It's intended because nobody's going to listen to somebody unless they're an enlightened master. So it's kind of like your calling card. But you realize, like, there's just a whole bunch of assholes walking around calling themselves enlightened teachers and basically doing the same thing that happens in Catholic school, which is humiliating you for not being like them or thinking like them or doing things the right way. Well, that's Catholic school, man. I mean, we've got that handled already.
We've already got an organization.
Yeah, like really devoted to that. So why do I have to deal with that with Tantra or any of these other things? Because Tantra is like, I get it. Okay, we're going to look in each other's eyes. We're going to have a nice release of chemicals. Beautiful. Where's the religious part of it? Like, why do we need to turn it into a whole big thing? Like, you want to have sex? Have sex. Yeah. Just study about it. Learn how to give orgasms. Great, beautiful. Learn how to channel, and raise your energy, blah, 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 whatever. You don't need all the spiritual drama around it. Yeah. It's just confusing things and manipulating people. And I'm just not into it, to be honest. And that's all I see. I don't see any... I see all these people talking about like, oh, I understand this about relationships and I understand this about that. And I'm like, you're just an asshole like everybody else, just different, and you're justifying whatever you're doing through some
mystical.
Yeah, through some mystical. Exactly. Well, how is that different from anything else that has ever come before you?
Right.
like all the sweetness, that is the problem with religious structure, is like all the sweetness gets sucked out in the form.
Yeah.
And you and I were talking about this earlier. It's like the form becomes the thing.
Yeah.
You know, the literal, this is how it was done. I get it. You know, a guy's sitting in the cave. He's like, oh, does this thing, pops in his head, breaks into the enlightened state, the unitive state. All the students are like, well, how did that happen? And he goes, well, let me see. Well, this morning I woke up and I chanted. So you must chant. You know, and then I take a little water in my nose. And then I spin around. And then I pray. And I take the sunlight in my eyes. And then I do this posture. And this day I did this posture in this way. I touched my head to my knee. And this takes me to enlightenment. So there you go. There's the beginning of religion.
That's the procedure.
Yeah. And that really is the world we live in. Yeah. It's just filled with people who have an experience, and I get it, we're human. We're like, I had an experience, yay. Well, how'd you do that? Yay. You know, oh, I did it this way. And they're like, well, I want to do that. And then, you know, if enough people do that, you have a cult.
It's still...
That's the reason we as humans have taken over the planet, because we actually have that ability to do. We look and we go, I want that. Whatever that is, I want to fly. That bird is doing that. I actually think it's really a call to life. Yeah. I don't really look at it as like a, not anymore. I just don't. I was like, well, of course, because that's what we do, man. Yeah. We want better. We're driven by that. It's in your DNA. I mean, that's why we're here, because somebody said, you know, I don't really want to live in this thing. I want to live in that. I want to, you know, the raven makes a nest in that way. Well, can we do that? Because this cave thing is kind of cold and not so much fun, you know? And it's like, so now people take advantage of that. And I feel like that's really where you start to get into kind of like the darker edge of that, is like people going like, oh, okay, well, people have an impulse, and I'm going to take that impulse and I'm going to use that for my need. So when I think of what I was really referring to with the coveting in the biblical sense, is I look at who was that really written for, right? Who is that written for, right? That wasn't written by the dude who doesn't have shit and goes, you know, I'm just going to sit here and just be happy with what I have. I'm not going to, God, we shouldn't covet. That he didn't write that. The dude who wrote that is the dude who could write. The dude who had the power and the money and the harem and the cattle and the house, and it was like, there's one of me and there are like 50,000 of them. We need a law here. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Right? That'll cover pretty much everything. Right? That means don't covet what I have, because you will get your rewards later. Exactly. But I get that. I mean, like, I understand that. That's really what I'm talking about like, you know, for me, my enlightenment was understanding that kind of stuff. Like realizing that it's not, dude, it's just like everybody has an agenda. Yeah. And the people who shame you about your agenda are really the ones who are hiding, sort of masking their agenda by shaming you. It's like, well, I don't have an agenda. Well, bullshit. Everybody has an agenda. I don't care who you are. You got an agenda. That's just the way it is. Yeah. No big deal. Well, it's great. I mean, you know, I feel like the tools we have are whatever tool works, to be perfectly honest. Like, so whatever works for you to minimize those things, whether it's your belief in something or a particular practice that you do, or a mindfulness thing. I mean, that is where I see any number, I mean, really like an infinite number of things. The problem is when people concretize that and say, I've got the way and now you have to have this way. That's the problem. So I think people are doing that. Like, there's a lot of again, Sedona it's very Christian in its nature. And so there's a lot of like praying and, going to church and asking for forgiveness. And I think all of those are tools to help the individual mitigate these impulses that are driving us. Now, is that the purpose to life? Personally, I don't think so. I mean, I think a lot of people get screwed up in all that stuff, for me, what helps me make sense of things is just seeing clearly. I'd rather just kind of see what the playing field is and deal with it rather than have a lot of stories about how it should be and let's go back to that, the utopian time. And, that myth has been around since, that myth has been used up over and over and over and over. It's in every religion. It's in every spirituality. Everybody, let's get back to the good old days, the utopian time, the time when this non-sin, that's just how it is. It's the Garden of Eden mythology in essence. It's the Noah's Ark mythology. It's there once was a time when it was all good and now it's not. And let's get back there. Okay, well, that's got about, 50,000 religions associated with that one structure. So I feel like for the individual, it's like what works for you. Understand that anything you try to suppress will be very difficult to deal with. And that's where, for me, the issues of like Tantra, specifically not Tantra so much, but sexuality become very interesting. Because sexuality is highly moralized. And it's moralized because if you sort of go through it, we have stuff now. That was part of our discussion earlier. We have stuff. We've got gadgets and things and money and credit cards, and we have stuff. And now we have stuff that wants to be handed down, that wants to be carried on, whether that's an idea, a psychological image, a religious ideal. We have something, whether it's mental, tangible, intangible, we have something that wants to be handed down. And as soon as we have that, we now have where things get moralized. Because now I have to kind of give some rules that come with my stuff. This stuff is good and that stuff is bad. These things are good, those things are bad, right? And so sexuality gets really tied into that because sexuality is one of the drives and commodities that we deal in. So by sort of turning sex into a highly moralized thing and suppressing that, what we're really saying is, overcome your animal nature so that you can live the higher life, get your rewards in heaven, and basically stay away from my women. Okay, one way or another. Stay away. No, this is mine. I want to make sure that child that is in that womb is mine. Mm-hmm. So I start to create a lot of moralizing around the vagina, around sexuality in general. And that moralizing becomes the basis of a lot of stuff that we're dealing with now. So now you have somebody who's like, oh, well, sex is bad. Well, sex is bad because if sex is good, then that means you have sexual access. If you have sexual access, then I can't control who has access. If I can't control who has access, I cannot control who is fertilizing that womb. If I can't control who's fertilizing that womb, that means that my resources are being used by an alien, by a parasite, and cuckolding me into basically supporting something that isn't mine and perpetuating somebody else's genes, not mine. So we have a lot of, ask a cop, what's the worst thing you want to get in the middle of? It's a domestic, because you break up one person and the other one's coming at you. Then you break them up and then the other one's coming at you, but they're fighting like cats and dogs with each other. Well, that's the phenomenon, this bizarre phenomenon of like possession, doubting paternity, and whatever that all means. This kind of cuckolded thing. So so many of our laws, are like, don't fuck other people's people.
Right.
Right? Don't go out and kill for fun. We have those because that's kind of what happens. I mean, that's kind of how it was, and then you just start to like, well, no, not so much.